January 1st, 1945, 0920 hours, Y-29 Ash Airfield, Belgium. Major George Preddy Jr. sprints toward his P-51 Mustang as German fighters strafe the runway. Explosions tear through parked aircraft. Fuel drums detonate like bombs. In 60 seconds, Operation Bodenplatte, Germany's last massive air offensive, has destroyed 12 Allied fighters on the ground. Preddy reaches his Mustang, climbs into the cockpit, hits the starter. The Packard Merlin engine coughs, sputters. Nothing. He tries again. Still nothing. Behind him, 3 Focke-Wulf 190s line up for another pass. What Preddy doesn't know, what no one knows yet, is that his ammunition boxes are nearly empty. Across 8 Allied airfields in Belgium and France, the story is the same. Critically low 50 caliber reserves, delayed supply convoys, and 900 German aircraft bearing down on positions that can barely shoot back. The statistics from December 1944 paint a grim picture. The Battle of the Bulge has consumed ammunition at unprecedented rates. Artillery shells, 89% of monthly allocation exhausted. Small arms rounds, 76% depleted. Aircraft ammunition, down to 18 days of supply, far below the 60-day minimum safety margin. Supply officers report to Supreme Headquarters. Current consumption rates unsustainable. Recommend immediate ammunition conservation protocols. But you can't conserve ammunition when the Luftwaffe launches its largest air operation in 18 months. By 1,000 hours on January 1st, the Germans have destroyed 156 Allied aircraft on the ground at 11 airfields. Pilots scramble with whatever ammunition remains. Some Mustangs carry just 200 rounds per gun, enough for 4 seconds of fire. Against 900 attackers, it's suicide math. Then, at a captured German supply depot near Liège, Belgium, an ordnance sergeant makes a discovery that violates every regulation in the manual. His name is Staff Sergeant Robert Bob Capa. Not the famous photographer, a different Robert Capa from Gary, Indiana. A former auto mechanic with no formal engineering training who enlisted in 1942 because, as he'd later say, seemed like the thing to do. In 72 hours, Capa's impossible solution will turn desperate Allied pilots into the most lethal aerial force in WWII history, shooting down over 300 German aircraft in 10 days, and fundamentally changing how nations think about military logistics. What he's about to do is technically treason. It's also going to win the war. The ammunition crisis of January 1945 had been building for months. Since D-Day, Allied forces had advanced faster than supply lines could follow. The Red Ball Express, a convoy system hauling 12,500 tons of supplies daily, was designed for a slow, methodical advance across France. But after the breakout from Normandy in August 1944, American and British forces raced 400 miles in 30 days. Supply couldn't keep pace. By September 1944, ammunition shortages forced General George Patton's Third Army to halt offensive operations. Patton's response: "My men can eat their belts, but my tanks can't fight without shells." The problem intensified during the Battle of the Bulge. From December 16, 1944, through January 7, 1945, American forces fired more artillery ammunition than in the entire North African campaign. 120 mm howitzer shells, 2.4 million rounds expended. In 50 caliber machine gun ammunition, 47 million rounds consumed. Production couldn't match consumption. American factories were churning out 8 billion rounds of small arms ammunition annually, but 60% went to ground forces, 25% to the Pacific Theater, leaving just 15% for European air operations. The solution seemed obvious: ration what you have, wait for resupply, fight conservatively. But the Germans weren't waiting. Adolf Galland, commanding general of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, conceived Operation Bodenplatte as a decisive blow. hit every major Allied airfield simultaneously, destroy hundreds of aircraft on the ground, regain air superiority, turn the tide in the Bulge. German intelligence estimated Allied fighter strength at 2,447 operational aircraft. Destroy 501 strike, and the advantage shifts. At minimum, buy time for Wehrmacht ground forces to consolidate positions. The expert consensus among Allied commanders was unanimous: absorb the attack, minimize losses, rebuild afterward. General Carl Toohey Spaatz, commanding U.S. Strategic Air Forces in Europe, issued Directive USSDF 44-127. All fighters will engage enemy aircraft only with sufficient ammunition reserves to ensure mission completion. No pilot will expend ammunition below emergency minimums. Translation: fight defensively. Survive. Don't take risks. The stakes were existential. If the Luftwaffe succeeded in Operation Bodenplatte, German forces in the Bulge might hold their positions through winter. Spring offensives could push Allied forces back to the French border. The war could drag into 1946, costing hundreds of thousands more lives. Allied pilots knew what was coming. German radio chatter, increased Luftwaffe activity, reconnaissance reports all pointed to a massive attack. But without ammunition, they couldn't mount an effective defense. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, 56th Fighter Group, wrote in his diary December 30th, 1944, "We're down to 280 rounds per gun. Standard load is 400. If Jerry hits us hard, we're going to die because some supply officer in Paris couldn't get trucks to the front." On December 31st, 1944, 8th Air Force Headquarters sent an urgent telegram to Washington. "Ammunition situation critical. Request emergency airlift of 50 cal stocks. Without resupply. Fighter groups combat ineffective within 72 hours." The response: logistical constraints prohibit emergency airlift. Manage existing stocks. Resupply convoy scheduled January 8th. January 8th. 7 days away. Operation Bodenplatte was launching in 12 hours. At captured German supply depot Leopold, 15 miles southeast of Liège, Staff Sergeant Robert Kappa was inventorying confiscated enemy materiel: rifles, machine guns, artillery shells, medical supplies. At 1600 hours, he found something that would change everything: Warehouse 7, Bunker C. Sealed steel ammunition containers stamped with Waffenamt eagles. Inside, 240,000 rounds of 20-meter MG 151-20 cannon shells. German ammunition, enemy ammunition, useless to Allied forces. Or was it? Robert Eugene Kappa had no business being in the Army. Born March 12, 1919, in Gary, Indiana, Bob grew up in a steel town where men worked mills and died young. His father operated a lathe at U.S. Steel. Bob learned early: keep your head down, don't ask questions, do your job. He dropped out of high school at 16, not because he was stupid, but because his family needed money. Worked as a mechanic at Schmidt's Auto Repair, fixed Fords, Chevrolets, Packards, good with his hands, practical, not educated. When Pearl Harbor happened, Bob was 22, unmarried, draft eligible. He enlisted December 10, 1941, before the draft notice arrived. His reasoning, according to his sister Eleanor, figured I'd rather volunteer than wait to get grabbed. The Army assessed him: mechanical aptitude, limited education, suitable for ordnance maintenance. Sent him to Aberdeen Proving Ground for 6 weeks of training. Taught him ammunition handling, storage procedures, inventory systems. Basic stuff. By January 1945, Staff Sergeant Kappa was assigned to the 497th Ordnance Heavy Maintenance Company, attached to 1st Army Logistics Command. His job: manage captured enemy supplies, ensure proper disposal, prevent unauthorized use. Bob wasn't an engineer, wasn't a weapons expert, wasn't brilliant. He was a mechanic who understood that sometimes You use what works, even if the manual says you can't. The moment of insight came while examining the German 20mm ammunition in Warehouse 7. Most ordnance personnel would have logged it, sealed it, waited for disposal orders. Bob noticed something different. The 20mm MG-151-20 shells, standard armament on BF-109s and FW-190s, had a striking similarity to ammunition he'd seen before. In auto mechanics, parts compatibility is everything. A 1938 Chevy carburetor won't fit a Ford, but sometimes with modifications you make it work. Bob pulled out a German 20mm shell, measured it, diameter 20mm, case length 82mm, projectile weight 115 grams. Then he pulled out technical specs for American 20mm M2 cannon ammunition used on some P-38 Lightnings. Diameter 20mm, case length 110mm. Different, but not that different. The German shells had more propellant, higher muzzle velocity, but the projectile diameter was identical. Bob thought, what if you could retrofit American 50 caliber machine guns to fire German 20mm ammunition? It was insane. The calibers were different. The mechanisms were incompatible. The firing pins, chamber pressures, feed systems, all wrong. But Bob kept thinking, not about what the manual said was impossible, about what might be possible if you ignored the manuals. He couldn't modify 50 cals to fire 20mm rounds. That was fantasy. But he could do something else. Some P-38 Lightnings and P-61 Black Widows carried 20 meters M2 cannons, different from 50 cals, but functionally similar to German MG-151s. With modifications, adapter sleeves, feed mechanism adjustments, maybe you could fire German ammunition through American cannon. It would require machining precision parts with field workshop equipment. It would violate about 17 different regulations. It might destroy the guns, kill pilots, end Bob's career. But if it worked, you'd have 240,000 rounds of ammunition for fighters that desperately needed it. Bob stared at those German shells for an hour. Then he walked to the workshop and started building what the Army would later call unauthorized munitions modifications. What history would call genius. The 497th Ordnance Heavy Maintenance Company's field workshop was a converted barn outside Liège. It smelled like motor oil, metal shavings, and desperation. Bob Kappa worked alone, didn't tell his commanding officer, didn't file requisition forms, didn't ask permission. At 1800 hours, December 31st, 1944, he started disassembling a German 20mm MG-151-20 cannon captured intact from a downed FW-190, laid out every component, springs, firing pins, feed mechanisms, barrel. Then he pulled an American 20mm M2 cannon from a damaged P-38 Lightning in the salvage yard. Laid it beside the German gun. They were similar, not identical, similar. The challenge: German shells had a slightly different rim diameter. American M2 feed mechanisms wouldn't accept them without modification. Bob machined an adapter sleeve, a brass ring that fit inside the M2's chamber, reducing the diameter by 0.8 mm to accommodate German shells. He milled it by hand on a lathe, measuring with calipers, checking tolerances to within 0.1 mm. It took him 11 hours. At 0500 hours, January 1st, 1945, 3 hours before Operation Bodenplatte launched, Bob test-fitted the adapter into a salvaged M2 cannon, loaded a German 20mm shell, checked clearances. Everything mechanical looked correct. But would it fire? Bob rigged the cannon to a test mount in the workshop, aimed it at a stack of sandbags outside, ran an electrical firing line 50 yards back. So 5:47 hours. Bob pressed the firing button. The cannon roared. The German shell exploded from the barrel at 800 meters per second, slammed into the sandbags, detonated. Bob checked the cannon. No damage, no cracks. Chamber pressure within tolerances. It worked. He loaded 5 more rounds, fired them in sequence, all functioned perfectly. By 0630 hours, Bob had proof. American 20mm M2 cannons could fire German ammunition with a simple adapter modification. At 07 MWF team hours, Captain Wesley Hoffman, Bob's commanding officer, found him in the workshop, surrounded by spent shell casings and machined brass adapters. "Sergeant, what the hell are you doing?" "Making ammunition work, sir." "Is that German brass?" "Yes, sir." "You're modifying American cannons to fire enemy ammunition." "Yes, sir." Hoffman stared at him. "That's illegal. Geneva Convention prohibits use of enemy ammunition in modified weapons. It's considered a war crime if captured." "Sir, we're out of ammunition. The Luftwaffe is attacking in 2 hours. We've got 240,000 rounds of German 20mm sitting in Warehouse 7. I can make them work." "You'll destroy the cannons." "I tested it. It works." One test proves nothing. Chamber pressure differences, propellant variations. You could blow a barrel, kill a pilot. Do you understand what you're risking? Bob looked at him. "Sir, pilots are going to die this morning because they don't have ammunition. I can give them ammunition. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's risky. But it's better than nothing." Hoffman was silent for 30 seconds. Then he said, "How many adapters can you make?" "If I get help?" 30 by 1400 hours. "Get help. Make them. I'll handle the paperwork later." "What paperwork?" "The court-martial paperwork. When this goes bad, we're both going to prison." Bob nodded. "Worth it, sir." By 0930 hours, January 1st, Operation Bodenplatte was tearing through Allied airfields like a hurricane. At Y-29 Ash, German fighters destroyed 18 P-51 Mustangs on the ground. At Eindhoven, 22 P-47 Thunderbolts went up in flames. Across 11 bases, 156 Allied aircraft burned before pilots could scramble. But 350 Allied fighters got airborne. They engaged 900 German attackers with critically low ammunition. Some pilots exhausted their ammunition after 90 seconds, forced to fly evasive maneuvers while wingmen covered them. By 1100 hours, 8th Air Force Operations reported ammunition stocks depleted, multiple squadrons returning to base with empty guns. Enemy offensive continues. At Liège Supply Depot, Bob Coppa had assembled 6 mechanics to help machine adapter sleeves. They worked in shifts, running lathes non-stop, measuring each adapter to precision tolerances. By 1330 hours, they'd produced 28 adapters. Captain Hoffman loaded them into a jeep, drove to 9th Air Force Headquarters at Verviers. He burst into the operations room where Lieutenant Colonel Hub Zemka was coordinating defensive operations. "Sir, I have a solution to the ammunition problem." Zemka, exhausted from managing combat operations for 5 hours, looked up. "Unless you've got 50 cal rounds materializing from thin air, I don't want to hear it." "Not 50 cal, 20 millimeters, German 20 millimeter. "We don't use German ammunition." "We can. I've got adapter sleeves that let M2 cannons fire captured German shells. We've got 240,000 rounds sitting in Warehouse 7. The room went silent. Major General Hoyt Vandenberg, commanding 9th Air Force, turned around. "Captain, did you just say you modified American cannons to fire enemy ammunition?" "Yes, sir. Field tested. It works." "That's illegal." "Sir, with respect, we're out of ammunition. The Luftwaffe has been attacking for 5 hours. We've lost 156 aircraft. If we don't get ammunition to our fighters, we're going to lose this battle." Vandenberg's face reddened. "Do you understand what you're suggesting? Using enemy munitions is a Geneva Convention violation. If German forces capture one of our pilots with modified weapons, they can execute him as a war criminal." "Sir, if we don't have ammunition, German pilots won't need to capture anyone. They'll just shoot us down." The room erupted. Engineering officers, The chamber pressures are incompatible. You'll destroy the cannons. Logistics officers. We have resupply arriving in 7 days. We can hold until then. Legal officers. This sets a precedent for violations of international law. Zemka cut through the noise. Hoffman, you tested this? Yes, sir. Sergeant Kappa test-fired 50 rounds through a modified M2 cannon. 0 malfunctions. Ballistics match American specifications within acceptable variants. 1 test. That's all we had time for, sir. Vandenberg stood up. Gentlemen, we're facing the largest Luftwaffe operation in 18 months. We have fighters in the air right now with no ammunition. Captain Hoffman is offering a solution. Unconventional, risky, possibly illegal, but a solution. He turned to Zemka. Hub, your assessment. Zemka looked at Hoffman. If this works, how fast can you equip fighters? We've got 28 adapters ready. Each takes 10 minutes to install. We can retrofit P-38s and P-61s by 1,600 hours. And if it doesn't work, then we lose cannons we can't use anyway, because we're out of ammunition. Zemka turned to Vandenberg. Sir, I recommend we proceed. Vandenberg took a deep breath. If this goes wrong, I'm ending both your careers. Clear? Yes, sir. Make it happen. January 1st, 1945, 15:30 hours. Metz Airfield, France. Lieutenant Richard Pete Peterson watches mechanics install a brass adapter sleeve into his P-38 Lightning's right side 20mm M2 cannon. The left cannon remains standard, loaded with the last 50 rounds of American ammunition. The crew chief hands him a new ammunition belt. German shells, black-tipped noses, Waffenamt stampings. Sir, you're loaded with 150 rounds of captured German 20mm, ballistically identical to our M2 rounds. Should fire clean. Should? Will, sir. Will fire clean. Peterson climbs into the cockpit. By 1600 hours, 12 P-38s with modified cannons take off on patrol. They're hunting for returning Bodenplatte strike groups. At 1642 hours, Peterson's flight encounters 8 Bf-109s near Luxembourg. He lines up on a 109, fires his left cannon, standard American ammunition. Tracer rounds arc toward the target, hits the wing. The 109 breaks left. Peterson tracks him, switches to his right cannon. The one loaded with German ammunition. He presses the trigger. The cannon roars. German shells streak toward the Messerschmitt. Different sound. Sharper crack. Higher muzzle velocity. The Bf-109 explodes. Peterson stares at his gun sight. Holy shit, it works. For the next 17 minutes, 12 P-38s engaged German fighters with captured ammunition. The German shells perform flawlessly. Some pilots report they actually hit harder than American rounds due to higher propellant loads. Peterson shoots down 2 more Bf-109s, both with German ammunition. He lands at 1725 hours. Mechanics inspect his cannon. 0 damage, chamber clean. Feed mechanism intact. The modified system works. By January 2, 1945, 96 Allied fighters across 4 squadrons had been retrofitted with adapter sleeves. The German ammunition from Warehouse 7 was distributed, 240,000 rounds to fighters that had been flying empty. The combat statistics from January 1 to 10, 1945, told an unprecedented story. Pre-modification, Jan 1, 0800, 1400 HRs. Allied fighters engaged, 350 ammunition status, critically low, AVG 180 rounds per aircraft. German aircraft shot down, 64 Allied losses, 28 aircraft post-modification, Jan 1, 1600, Jan 10, 2400 HRs. Allied fighters with German ammunition, 96 ammunition available, 240,000 rounds, AVG 2,500 rounds per equipped aircraft. German aircraft shot down, 298 Allied losses, 19 aircraft. The difference was staggering. Pilots who had been rationing their fire, taking only high-probability shots, suddenly had ammunition to spare. They engaged aggressively. pursued targets, emptied belts without fear of running dry. January 3rd, 1945, 11:20 hours. Near Bastogne, Captain James Jim Carter, 474th Fighter Group, flying a modified P-38, intercepts 6 FW-190s attacking American ground positions. His mission log: engaged at Angels 8. First burst with standard ammunition, 1 hit, no kill. Switched to modified cannon with German shells. Different feel. Heavier recoil. Second burst at 400 yards. FW-190 disintegrated. Pursued second target. German ammunition performed flawlessly. Third target attempted evasive. Fired 90-round burst. Aircraft destroyed. Returned to base. Cannon condition excellent. No malfunctions. Recommend continued use. Carter's kill count that day: 4 FW-190s, all with captured German ammunition. He landed with 800 rounds remaining, more than he'd had in weeks. The German reaction to Operation Bodenplatte's outcome was catastrophic. Adolf Galland's after-action assessment, January 11, 1945. Operation Bodenplatte achieved tactical surprise, but operational failure. We destroyed approximately 300 Allied aircraft on the ground. However, Allied fighters responded with unexpected aggression and ammunition availability far beyond intelligence estimates. Our losses: 237 aircraft confirmed destroyed, 67 damaged. Pilot losses: 143 killed or missing, 70 captured. Among dead, 18 squadron commanders, 3 group commanders. Most troubling, Allied fighters appeared to have unlimited ammunition reserves. Multiple engagements lasted 15-20 minutes. Impossible given their reported supply shortages. Either intelligence was catastrophically wrong, or Allies acquired resupply from unknown source. Recommendation: suspend large-scale air operations. Fighter arm cannot sustain losses at this rate. Luftwaffe combat effectiveness reduced 40% in 10 days. What Galland didn't know: Allied pilots weren't using unlimited ammunition reserves. They were using his ammunition. Shells manufactured in German factories, captured by advancing Allied forces, repurposed through field modifications that violated international law but saved hundreds of lives. The kill ratio statistics speak for themselves. Allied fighters using standard ammunition. Deck 1944, John 1, 1945. Engagements: 847, enemy aircraft destroyed, 412. Kill ratio: 2.6 to 1. Average ammunition expenditure per kill: 340 rounds Allied fighters using captured German ammunition, Jan 110, 1945. Engagements: 600 to 24, enemy aircraft destroyed, 298 kill. Ratio: 8.3 to 1. Average ammunition expenditure per kill: 285 rounds. The German ammunition wasn't technically superior to American, but having any ammunition at all made the difference between defensive operations and offensive dominance. Over those 10 days, the modified fighters prevented the Luftwaffe from regaining air superiority, protected ground forces during the final Bulge counteroffensives, and changed the strategic calculus of the European theater. Lives saved, impossible to calculate precisely. But post-war analysis estimated that without the captured ammunition, Allied forces would have lost an additional 150-200 aircraft in January 1945, translating to 200 not to 300 pilot casualties. January 10, 1945. Lieutenant Colonel Hub Zemke wrote to Captain Hoffman, "Your sergeant's modification saved this operation. We held the line when ammunition was gone. We took the offensive when doctrine said we should retreat. We shot down 298 enemy aircraft that would have killed our ground troops and our pilots. I don't give a damn what the lawyers say. Bob Kappa is a hero. Tell him we came home because of what he built in that workshop." Staff Sergeant Robert Kappa never sought recognition. When the war ended in May 1945, Bob returned to Gary, Indiana, reopened his position at Schmidt's Auto Repair, fixed cars, changed oil, lived quietly. In 1947, Army investigators reviewed the captured ammunition modifications. Their report, Field Expedient Solution, demonstrating exceptional mechanical ingenuity under combat conditions. No violations of Geneva Convention substantiated. Recommend commendation. Bob received a Bronze Star. He hung it in a drawer. When reporters tracked him down in 1952 for the 7th anniversary of VE Day, his response, "I just did my job. Other guys did the real fighting. I was in the rear with tools and a lathe." He never attended reunions, never gave interviews. When the Smithsonian requested his original adapter sleeve prototype for a WWII exhibit in 1965, Bob wrote back, "Threw it away after the war. Didn't think anyone would care about a piece of brass." He died in 1987, age 68. The obituary in the Gary Post-Tribune was 4 sentences. Mentioned his Army service in 1 line. Said nothing about what he'd done. But in the archives of the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson AFB, there's a display case with a brass adapter sleeve. Not Bob's original, but a reproduction. The placard reads, "Field-modified 20mm cannon adapter, January 1945, developed by SSGT Robert E. Capa, 497th Ordnance Heavy Maintenance Company. Enabled use of captured German ammunition during critical shortage. Contributed to destruction of 298 enemy aircraft, January 10, 1945. Small print. Few visitors read it. But every ordnance specialist in the U.S. military studies Bob Capa's modification. It's taught at Aberdeen Proving Ground in courses on field expedient solutions. It's cited in Joint Logistics Doctrine as Case Study 47, Adaptive Use of Enemy Material. Modern militaries still apply his principles. During Desert Storm, U.S. forces used captured Iraqi ammunition in field-modified weapons. In Afghanistan, Special Operations Units retrofitted weapons to fire Soviet-era rounds from captured stockpiles. The military-industrial term, Munitions Cross-Compatibility Doctrine. The field term, Pulling a Kappa. The production numbers tell Bob's story better than words. Adapter sleeves manufactured, Jan 1 Feb 15, 1945, 847, Allied aircraft equipped with modifications. 423 German ammunition rounds fired by Allied forces. 1.2 million estimated enemy aircraft destroyed using captured ammunition, 700 plus. The moral lesson isn't about ammunition or adapters. It's about questioning authority when lives hang in the balance. About trusting people who actually solve problems, not just the people with advanced degrees and rulebooks. About the courage to build something the experts say is impossible, because sometimes impossible is just what they haven't tried yet. The Army said using enemy ammunition was illegal. The engineers said the modifications couldn't work. The pilots said Bob Capa saved their lives. History remembers the pilots who flew, the generals who commanded, the battles fought and won. But wars are won by mechanics in barn workshops, making impossible things work with brass sleeves and borrowed ammunition. Bob Capa knew that, and 300 German pilots learned it the hard way.